Welcome to Family Rosary Presents Through the Mysteries. Join hosts Father David Marcham, Allison Gingras, and Stephen Driscoll as they share their thoughts on how to integrate the Rosary into daily family life. You'll also learn more about the inspiring story of Father Patrick Peyton, a Holy Cross priest, his journey towards sainthood, and why he believed that the family that prays together stays together. Welcome back to Through the Mysteries. This is episode 5, and we're joined again by Father David Marcham and Stephen Driscoll, and I am Allison Gingras. I am the Director of Digital Evangelization for Family Rosary USA, and we begin each one of our episodes with discussing our Rosary Mystery Day. Stephen, what kind of day are you having?
I gotta go with joyful, specifically the Visitation, because as you both know, I was sick last week. It was rough. I was away the whole time, and now I'm back. So it's like I'm visiting, helping. It's awesome.
It's like you're visiting?
Well, yeah, kind of. Well, as Mary did. She went, visited Elizabeth, helped, worked. Now that's what I'm doing here. Helping,
in
working.
haste, Stephen. That means you have to do everything in haste.
Well,
Quick.
That's a lot less fun. Okay.
Father David, what kind of day are you having?
For a different reason, I'm also having a visitation kind of day. But I'm thinking back to a great visit I had with a priest from Chicago. Actually, you may know the family he's from. He's a parishioner at Holy Family in East Taunton, and his name is Father Mark Augustine. He's from the Archdiocese of Chicago, and he's a canon lawyer, and he and our pastor and I and his parents had a nice dinner, and it was just great to visit and share what's going on in Diocese of Fall River, Archdiocese of Boston, Holy Cross Family Ministries, and what's going out in Chicago.
Do you find there's a universality between like what happens locally here and what happens in the church abroad?
Yeah, there's definitely common ground. I think that's, for me, it was such a pleasure to meet Father Mark and just to share, our perspectives and our common work, in the vineyard. So yeah, I do find that universality, that Catholic nature of our church.
I love that. I've seen that too as myself as I go out and speak and travel. It's so interesting that the things that we worry about with our children being away from the faith or the things that we struggle with in the faith, it's just, I see that with other people as well, not just here or in my own family. I'm having a Luminous day, specifically the Transfiguration. As we prepare for Lent, this will air actually during Lent, and I feel like every Lent it transforms me. I try to find things to remove fast from in my life that give me more time for God. So I feel like I'm excited for Lent. I'm one of those Catholic dorks that gets really excited for Lent and this kind of, not misery loves company so much, or this collective talking about universality, this coming together as a people of God to sacrifice, to be more mindful of God during the Lenten season. And I'm excited. You guys excited for Lent?
Oh yeah, the superest excited. It's going to be awesome. So good.
We've got a lot going on in Lent.
We sure do. Yes. And we invite you to familyrosary.org to see what we have going on for this Lent, both in person here at the Father Peyton Center and, of course, online. We want to include in each one of our episodes as well just some teaching, some catechesis, some understanding of the faith. In each episode, we also want to bring you a little bit of the Rosary, the pieces and the parts of the Rosary. Today, we're going to look at the Apostles' Creed. And specifically, we chose that because right now we're in the Jubilee of Hope that Pope Francis has put forward, and he wrote a bull of benediction called Hope Does Not Disappoint. Since my Latin is almost as bad as my English, Father David, how do we say this in Latin?
In Latin, we say it spes non confutit,
which means hope does not disappoint. And Pope Francis calls for the Jubilee of Hope, and he shares the coming Jubilee year will also coincide with a significant date for all Christians, namely the 1700th anniversary of the celebration of the first great ecumenical council, that of Nicaea. He goes on to say, the Council of Nicaea sought to preserve the Church's unity, which was seriously threatened by the denial of the full divinity of Jesus Christ, and hence his consubstantiality with the Father. Some 300 bishops took place, convoked convoked at the behest of the Emperor of Constantine. Their first meeting took place in the Imperial Palace on the 20th of May, 325. After various debates, by the grace of the Spirit, they unanimously approved the creed that we still recite each Sunday at the celebration of the Eucharist. The Council Fathers chose to begin that creed by using for the first time the expression, "we believe," as a sign that all the churches were in communion and that all Christians professed the same faith. Now, having said all that, the reason I thought that this would be a great place for us to spend today with relation to the Rosary is that we recite the Apostles' Creed. And this was about the Nicene Creed. And I don't know about you guys, but I've often wondered and had to actually look up what the difference is. And Father David, you said the greatest thing about growing up what you thought the Apostles' Creed was.
Yeah, because it was the first creed that we were asked to learn in what we used to call CCD. I thought it was the Children's Creed. It was shorter, the words are smaller, and we could memorize it. Back then it was doable.
So what is the difference between the Nicene Creed and the Apostles' Creed?
All right, Allison, if you let me indulge me, there's a couple of phrases in that papal bull that I just want to point out. The first one that came to me is like, well, what is an ecumenical council? And because that's not a word we throw around every day here.
Well, here we do. Maybe not.
We might hear, yeah. Well, the answer to the question, it's when the Pope and bishops from worldwide come together to discuss, to pray, and decide on church doctrine, as well as administration and discipline. Ecumenical is derived from the word, and this is where I am not Greek, so I'll do my best. It is okumenikos, meaning from the whole world. So that's where we get ecumenical, meaning universal or worldwide. It's the Pope and the bishops coming together to discuss and decide through the Holy Spirit a teaching on the church. And what they did decide at this Council of Nicaea, actually on 2 dates, was they affirmed the divinity of Jesus and his consubstantiality. That is not in the Apostles' Creed, but the Nicene Creed, with the Father. So Jesus and the Father are one substance. They are both God. Jesus has 2 natures. And in recent years, the Nicene Creed has changed its wording to have the word consubstantial in it. So many of us who grew up without that word in had to learn that word, and that's that part of it.
My dad still complains about that to this day.
He does. I understand. We're about the same age. The other thing I want to point out when we talk about creed, it comes from the Latin word credo, which is translated into I believe or I trust. So every time that we say the Apostles' Creed or the Nicene Creed, we, and hopefully with our families, are saying, I believe, I trust. And then we list all the things we believe in. You know, as we've talked about before, Father Peyton always spoke about hearing his father, John Peyton, begin the family rosary each night after the sign of the cross, making the statement, I believe in God the Father Almighty. And he talked about how powerful that was for him as he grew into becoming a man himself. And today we're going to talk about the Apostles' Creed, and as I said, it's a summary of the faith of the apostles. And this Apostles' Creed was promulgated by what we call the magisterium of the church, the Pope in conjunction with the bishops. And so that's where it comes from, and it represents what it was that the apostles believed in and what we still believe in. And it predates the Nicene Creed.
Oh, so it predates it?
It does.
I did not know that.
There you go.
Do you have anything to add?
No fun facts, but I'm a big fan of the Apostles' Creed, I'll say that. I kind of see it as a spark notes of faith. I don't know if you guys have used spark notes, but that was a thing when I was in high school.
We had Cliff Notes.
Ah, okay. So, similar. But yeah, it's the way I see it is you're never going to be able to explain to someone what you believe better than the saints and the apostles would have. So, we're given that quick little blurb, says everything you need, gets all the points across, and it's something that can, especially if you're praying the rosary daily, it roots you in that faith. You know what you believe because you just said it. You say it every day. Especially if even if you go to Mass, daily Mass, you don't always say the Nicene Creed. So having that rosary, it roots you in what your faith is. So. Big fan, personally.
When it comes to praying the Rosary, the Apostles' Creed, I try at least once a week to slow down and pray it word for word. And we're going to actually spend 2 episodes talking about the Apostles' Creed. We'll do some more in episode 6 because it's just such a long prayer, such a beautiful prayer. But to slow down and to really think about what words you are speaking. Like, this is your profession of faith. Like, you're saying not just this prayer, but this, when you pray, you are really, for me anyway, I'm internalizing these words that I believe, and it helps me to remember what my Catholic faith teaches, what I believe in being a Catholic. And I don't know, do you find, Father, that sometimes you have to slow down because you say this so often, or, we can get kind of lost in our prayers when we say things over and over sometimes?
Absolutely. It's so human, especially when we become familiar with something, and in the busyness of life to roll right through those different articles. As you know, as a priest, this is the focus of my life, is to grow in holiness and virtue through understanding and study of what are the teachings of the Church, and then to share that. But I'm so glad that we're doing these 2 episodes on the Apostles' Creed, because it's caused me to go deeper. And going to what you were saying before about how you love Lent, Lent is the time when we can intentionally go deeper in a particular period of time where we give it a special emphasis.
Yeah, I also have to slow myself down sometimes, because with this one, it's a little long. It takes a minute to memorize, and especially if you're saying the Nicene Creed, I know I try to breeze through it so I don't mess it up. If I can just blast through it, it's like, all right, I did it, I'm done, good. So it's good to take that time to slow down and really say each article, so you know what you're really standing firm on.
It's interesting that I can say the Nicene Creed from memory when I am in Mass. Mm-hmm. Actually, I'm usually interpreting because my daughter is deaf, so it's kind of I think it's kind of helped me even go deeper into the meaning of the words of the Nicene Creed when you have to interpret into sign language. But I find that I struggle with the Apostles' Creed because I always want to revert back to the Nicene Creed. So if I'm saying it with other people, I always pull it out and read it. And then, of course, my Catholic pride gets in the way. And I think, are these people thinking I just don't know this prayer? It's so ridiculous.
I always have that one word. It's like a train track where you have the 2 diverging ways and you gotta pull the lever. That lever for me is the word maker or creator.
Yeah, and let me tell you a story. I was brand new in seminary. We were on the steps right outside the chapel at St. John's Seminary in Brighton. Beautiful setting. Cardinal Sean had just arrived. We had the rector there. It was a beautiful day. And they start to pray what they thought was going to be the Apostles' Creed. And to your point, someone said the wrong word. And it like the whole train went off the tracks. And it was so enlightening to me because, we had a cardinal, we had the rector, we had, theologians,
Supposed to be smart guys.
And the rest of us plebes. And it took a good 30 seconds to get the train back on the tracks. And I was like, okay, all right, that's humanity.
This brings up a really good point that I would like to ask a priest about. So, some people get very kind of focused on the words of the prayer, and if they're not said specifically, they feel like the prayer is wrong, or that God isn't going to hear it or answer it because they haven't said it specifically, perfectly. And one of the things that I've kind of used to explain it, that there's a rite, R-I-T-E, rite for liturgical prayers, like the Mass has a right way to say things. But when we're praying devotions, there really isn't a right way. Obviously, you want to learn it to the best of your ability, and you want to pray it but it's really your disposition of your heart that's important when it comes to prayer. Have you ever had anybody kind of bring that up to you, or am I completely wrong, Father, and there really is a right way and I'm in trouble?
No, you make some good distinctions between R-I-T-E and R-I-G-H-T in terms of right way. I think one of the things to remember is, he's now a bishop, Bishop Chris Coyne said, when it came to us future priests and using the Roman Missal for the celebration of Mass, he said, don't put anything in that isn't there, and don't take anything out that is there. So those are kind of the rules for we priests. That being said, none of us bats 1,000. We misspeak sometimes. I think just speaking about pre-celebrating Mass and other liturgical moments, if it is not intentional, if it is a mistake and we can't catch it or will be more distracting, we're told just keep going, that God provides and understands. I would say that when we pray, we should try to keep it within bounds. So we don't want to say anything that is not in keeping with the teachings of the Church. That's not what you're talking about. I think you're talking more about can people get too scrupulous in their prayers? There are people that are so detail oriented. Like I have I won't name him, but a priest friend that if his lampshade is 1 degree off, before he keeps talking to you, he's got to go fix it. I think the same can happen with our prayers. We can get too caught up in the detail and lose the spirit of the prayers. And really, God understands. So I always tell people, if you miss a word or you misspeak or you leave a word out, that's okay. What God's looking at our hearts, and He understands whether our limitations. So I think you're right on with the way you see it, Allison.
As a mother, I think about when my kids used to draw little pictures for me, and they brought it up to me. They weren't perfect. Sometimes I had to ask them, like, what is this a picture of? Or explain your picture to me, because it was just scribbles. And it was not once did I take that little scribbled paper and crunch it up into a ball and throw it away and go back and do this perfectly. Most of the time, it ended up on my refrigerator. And I think of me as an imperfect parent, if I can see the beauty in what my child is trying to present to me, how much more does God see in the beauty in our prayers? So I think this has been a great conversation of not getting too much into the weeds and really just coming to God with your heart open for Him to hear your prayers. So we end each one of our episodes with a rosary story. And if you'd like to share your rosary story, we would love to hear it, to share it. You can go to familyrosary.org to find the link to leave your rosary story. This story comes from Amanda Laura, who is a Catholic Mom contributor, and she's really a talented Catholic historical fiction author. And Stephen, can you share Amanda's story with us?
I can totally do that. I'm really good at that.
Yes, you
reading
are.
Stuff. All right. When our daughter and our daughter-in-law were both pregnant in 2015, I had concerns for their health and the health of the babies. One day, I was praying the rosary after morning mass with a group of elderly ladies. I was thinking about our girls during one of the Hail Marys, and just as we finished, "Blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus," the wooden statue of our Blessed Mary that I was facing became animated, and these words were issued out loud from her lips: "Everything will turn out fine." I discovered I was the only person in the church to have this powerful experience of hearing those words. However, that statement from the Blessed Mother, "Everything will turn out fine," has been a mantra in my life ever since. Gratefully, our granddaughter Catherine and grandson Declan were born healthily 3 days apart and recently celebrated their 9th birthday.
Thank you, Stephen. Father, any thoughts about Amanda's story?
I think it's an amazing story. I think it's a reminder to us that God speaks in many ways to us. Sometimes there's something amazing like this that no one else gets to experience but you experience. And then there's times where we all hear something, in scripture or a conversation that deepens our faith. And what I get out of this story is that our friend Amanda received what she needed. While she was in communion and prayer, she received a consolation that she needed, and it was through her faith that led to hope. And that she's adopted that strong faith in God caring for her, our Blessed Mother's care for her, and that gives her hope no matter what she's facing. And in this year of the Jubilee of Hope, Pilgrims of Hope, it's a great message. So God bless her and thank her for sharing this.
It reminds me of that quote from St. Padre Pio, "Pray, hope, and don't worry." A lot of us can often just kind of spin our wheels or get too in the weeds of certain things. But at the end of the day, faith really is simple. Just hope in God.
That's what I took from it too, that we get very worried about the people in our lives, the situation in our lives, and I call it a hamster wheel of worrying about what can happen. But worry is not an action, right? Worry is a reaction. So to be able to channel that worry to something that's actually tangible, like prayer, really does show that when you turn yourself to prayer, God will really make himself known. You were saying how God will reveal himself. One of the really fun stories about my daughter is adopted from China, and I have anxiety. So the idea that I was going to go on a plane to China and bring home this little girl who was nearly 4 years old and profoundly deaf, well, you can imagine that would cause a little bit of anxiety. So I was in Mass one day and just it was the prayer of the faithful, and my mind wandered for a minute, and I kind of looked up to heaven. I was like, Lord, I really want to do your will, but this is scary. I'm not. And then at that time, my two boys who were about 6 and 9 were like crawling under my legs and trying to get at each other to fight. And I was like, again, looking up to heavens, like, Lord, you've seen what a great job I've done with these two. Are you sure you want to send me this little girl? And I brought my attention back to the prayer of the faithful. And at that very exact moment, the deacon said, may all the orphans of the world find good homes. Like, I call that a God sentence. Like, you couldn't make that happen if you tried. And I could have just ignored that, like, well, that was a crazy coincidence. But instead, I understood that was God directly speaking to my heart through my prayer, my very conversational prayer of, Lord, are you sure you want me to do this? I think he made it very, very clear, and praise be to God, I did follow through, and now she's been with us for 15 years, and I cannot imagine my life without her. But I could have gotten myself very much in the state of worry and thinking I could never have done what God was calling me to do. But instead, like Amanda, turned to the Lord in prayer, especially the Rosary, and really gave myself to his will. So any other thoughts before we wrap up today's episode?
Just that I encourage our listeners to share these stories. Not only do they encourage all of the listeners, but they encourage each of us here in our faith journeys. So we're grateful to them.
Definitely, yeah. Oh, I got nothing new. That was a great ending right there, Father Dave.
Lee, thank you as always for listening, and we'll pick up with the Apostles' Creed in our next episode. God bless.
Thank you for listening to Family Rosary Presents Through the Mysteries. Be sure to tune in every 2 weeks for a new episode. Please consider subscribing to the podcast, leaving feedback or a review, and recommending Through the Mysteries to your family and friends. For prayer resources or to learn more about Father Patrick Peyton, please visit familyrosary.org. Until next time, we pray you and your family will continue discovering new ways to weave the Rosary into your daily life.